All right, thank you for staying with us. It's still VOP this morning on Voice of the People Television. Have to move straight down into the business of the day. And that has to do with the call by the Christian Youth Forum of Nigeria, CYFN. They've accused the group managing director of NNPC Limited, Mele Kyari, of self-enrichment at the expense of Nigerians. The forum, led by its national president, Reverend Frank Oshiga, called for Kyari's immediate removal by President Bola Tinubu, citing a lack of empathy and mismanagement under his leadership. Do recall that Mele Kyari had been there as the group managing director of NNPCL since the past administration under Buhari. Now his tenure also have been extended to this present administration. Anyway, they blamed Kyari for issues including subsidy scams, poor quality petroleum imports, and the mismanagement of the Port Harcourt refinery, leading to severe hardship with fuel prices exceeding 1,000 naira per litre, which they describe as economic terrorism. The CYFN warned of impending nationwide protest if Kyari is not removed and urged all Nigerians to join their demand for his resignation or dismissal. And we have with us in the studio this morning to help make sense of this particular topic, we have Mr. Segun Shopito. He's the chairman, Accountability Council and Transparency Network. Good morning, Mr. Segun.
Good morning, Fina.
Good to have you in the studio.
Always morning. A pleasure to be with you guys.
All right, it's like the issue in NNPCL is not really dying down anytime soon. First, it was Dangote that talked about how NNPCL officials and some other marketers in Nigeria have blending plants in Malta, which Mele Kyari came up to refute. But now we've seen another group, CYFN, calling for his removal as the group managing director of NNPCL. What do you really make of this call, sir?
Well, it's not surprising, and I think that perhaps you could also argue that it's long overdue. I'm a private sector person, in addition to being a civil society person, and in all of my professional career, what we know is they say the reward for hard work or good work is more work. But apparently, with the Nigeria Public Service, it looks as if the reward for very poor work and pretty much maybe no work is more work. Mele Kyari has been in this position, I think, he's been there since President Muhammadu Buhari, and here we are, so probably about 9 years now, something like that. And the results are absolutely self-evident, very clear, colossal failure. Whatever the metrics that you want to use will be, whether you want to just talk about the the
Don't you think he's doing something right for him to have been retained in that space? He must be doing something right. Somebody must be giving him thumbs up. Nigerians Nigerians might be saying, look, you are not doing a good job, but the presidency from Buhari up until this administration are probably pleased with what he's doing.
You may have a point, and that might very well explain why he's still there. But he works for Nigerians. I mean, look, we must not forget this. He works for Nigerians. He works for me, he works for you, and those of us sitting at this table, and every other person watching. And not for Buhari or for Tinubu. They are only supervising him on our behalf. And if Nigerians are saying that, look, this guy is not performing, then, what's he doing there? How can we have the group CEO, and by the way, this shouldn't, I really don't like when things are a bit personalized, so it's not, so it doesn't sound as if, this is a witch hunt or some sort of attack on the person of the gentleman called Mele Kyari. I don't know him, I have nothing against him. He's probably a good guy, he's probably a nice guy, but the results that we see as a country, suggest that he has no business being in that position. How can you be the group managing director of NNPC, the owner of 4 refineries, and in 9 years, none of those refineries have worked, almost at all. There have been periods when we've had 10% capacity utilization, 5% capacity. They've never really worked. Within that period, yeah, we have had a fresh The largest single train refinery in the entire world has been built in that period. That project started 2013. They actually started the actual building in 2016.
Okay, sure.
So between 2016 and 20, I'm sorry, Chukwuba, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Between 2016 and now, in fresh new refinery worth $20 billion that can process 650,000 barrels of crude per day has been built from scratch. And we can't maintain ours, and then the man is still sitting on the table.
We're spending 1.5 trillion already on
Exactly.
Shogu, let's begin to put together the bits and pieces of all of these. You know, the controversy surrounding what the NMPCL has become in recent days. We are all too familiar with it. But you talked about results, and then the reason why for 9 good years or thereabout, Mele Kyari has remained on that seat. And within the past few days or weeks, rather, that Aliko Dangote, one of Nigeria's heaviest investors in our economy, came out openly and said, look, there's a problem. I can't get all that I need. NUPRC has said, give me 29 barges of oil, and I can't get all of that. Even the IOCs are refusing to give me the allocated quantity, you know, based on what the PIA law says about local content, you know, within the oil industry. And in all of this, within that period, there's been a flurry of some kind of media pushback, you know. The last one we had was a coalition of 92 civil society organizations. I think that's huge. Yep. 92 civil society organizations saying, please, President, Mele Kyari has done a very good job. Let him stay. Don't remove him. And again, even there was an op-ed on this day. I don't know if you came about it. The guy had said so much, very well articulated, and even said that between the time he entered and now that NMPC has made so much profit. And I'm trying to position all of this within the context of what Nigerians think the NMPCL has become and what the media pushbacks are telling us. So can you help us relate this with this government's effort to fight corruption?
You know, very interesting angle, Chukwuma, and I think that maybe I'll quickly borrow from something that Moses said, you know. So the only way to begin to rationalize this is to begin to suspect that perhaps the performance indicators, we call it key performance indicators, KPIs, you know, in the private sector, that he's being measured with is totally different from what you and I think he's being measured with. You know, he's definitely serving the purpose of somebody.
Could
There's
that be
no
the reason
doubt about that.
He would say the truth at a particular time?
Yes.
Because he made mention of that
Yes.
when he was being probed. He said, I will talk about what is happening in NPC at a particular time.
They always say that. They always say that, but we never hear that truth from them.
Now, let me take you to...
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so I was just to answer, you know, Chukwuma's question, you know. So the issue for me is, if you say, you know, it appears as if he's performing, that's why it's being kept there. And then, you know, there's a large media, some sort of chorus.
Onslaught.
Yes, that, you know, saying this guy is doing
Against
well
people on
and
the
all
other
of that,
side.
you know. Obviously, we know that these things get paid for somehow. And I tell you, it's not so difficult to push profitability, you know, when you are presenting financial performance reports of an organization. I remember, you know, Cadbury Nigeria Limited, and it was a public case, so I can mention their name, you know, reported profits and were paying dividends. They even borrowed money from banks to pay dividends, only for it to come out to light after some sort of forensic investigation that they had been making losses for years. And the MDCO of that organization had actually been cooking the books. And they actually paid profits, dividends with borrowed money.
So you know, is it possible to relate this with the concept of corruption fighting back?
Absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt.
Before we go this deep, I was going to ask you a question, and I think I should just do it now. The question is on the politicization of the Christian organization. My question is, this outcry that's coming out now is from a Christian organization, Christian Youth Forum of Nigeria, calling for the sack of Mele Kyari. Now, let's not forget that an association of Igbos have come out to say that, look, this is targeted at the president himself, all right? Since when? Since when has a Christian organization become political? Is that something that we should be concerned
Sorry, can I
about?
cut in? Moses is not an association of Igbo.
Okay.
It's a pressure group.
A pressure group.
It's a pressure group, just that it has an Igbo name. It says Ohaneze Think Tank.
Okay.
Yeah.
Think tank, not the main,
Okay.
not the main Ohaneze.
Not the main Ohaneze.
Ohaneze think tank is more like a pressure group.
Okay.
But you know, it's interesting that he gave that clarification, because when I read that, all I saw was Ohaneze.
Ohaneze.
I didn't see the think tank part. You know, so, and it's just instructive. It's a good question you ask. Why is this a Christian thing? Why is it a sociocultural thing? Why can't we just relate with the facts on the table, the fact that Nigerians are not happy with the NNPC in particular, and then, you know, just remove the guy? Why is this so sacred? You know, there's another point that has to be made. When the special investigator by the president was appointed, my goodness, the idea was that he was going to probe the CBN, and the president at that time said, and other government-owned enterprises. And the NNPC was clearly touted as being a potential target, along with the NSPMC, that's the Printing Corporation, and about 3 or 4 others where there had been apparent cases of high corruption. What has happened since then? All of a sudden, even though I had my issues with the work that the special investigator did and all of the reports that they threw out, because I thought that had all sorts of undertones of vendetta against the person of Emefiele, even though I didn't, you know, support Emefiele. I don't think Emefiele covered himself with flowers either. But instructively, the work of that special investigative panel has been truncated very summarily,
Okay.
you know, and before, very interestingly, before they were able to turn their searchlight to then, in fact, everybody was saying, if you remove Emefiele, what is Kyari still doing there? Because they were working together very closely during the war years. So it's really interesting that, you know, we're scrutinizing somebody. In fact, the guy is in prison till as we speak, and Kyari is still strutting about and smiling and speaking good.
See, there's a lot going on within that space. It's becoming a little bit cumbersome to deal with. Like one did say that for those of us that analyze these things, we need to go for some, you know, we need to have our minds checked afterwards, because it's troubling to look at the things surrounding this country. Talking about the points that you raised now, the abrupt stoppage of Jim Obaze's team, there's a report that certain discovery were made. Of course, like you stated, he was still on the CBN. And then, would you agree with the sacking of the many directors that were laid off as a result of what was gotten from the Jim Obaze report? Now, some have said the report was not to indict these people for them to be sacked. It was to indict them that they might be prosecuted. But now they've been sacked and there's no prosecution being held that would have revealed more things to Nigerians. How do you relate to that?
I think I relate to that by wondering why, out of the entire management of the CBN, only, what's his name? Godwin Emefiele is being prosecuted. In fact, they started off by saying that he was funding terrorism as the CBN governor. You know, it was mind-boggling to me. I really couldn't believe my ears. I never supported majority of the policies of Emefiele, but to accuse him that he was a sponsor of terrorism as the central bank governor, do we know the kind of damage that did to our public image, that the primary monetary policy organ of the government was being dragged through all of this political miasma?
Do you think it was
to use that
because
word?
Because of the role he played with the money?
Oh, absolutely. So for me, look, let's not mince words. This is purely, in my opinion, nobody can convince me otherwise. This is purely vendetta. It was a revenge mission against the person of Emefiele, rather than any kind of pursuit of corruption and all of that. Because if it wasn't, then those guys that you mentioned that were fired would also have been in court. Did Emefiele act alone? At what point did Emefiele do any of the things that he did all by himself? For goodness sake, he presented documents with President Buhari's signature and they said it was forged. You know, so, I mean, it's also ridiculous. It's a pure political vendetta. I think it was just a revenge mission because of the things that he did, you know, with all of the cash crunch.
Is it really,
we're not really
is it really a revenge mission, or is it the fact that
corruption?
Mr. Jim Obaze and his team were beginning to open lots of cans of worms that belong to some high-profile individuals
Look,
in Nigeria?
I am a finance professional.
Okay.
This is my industry. And I can tell you that half of the things that Emefiele was accused of doing was just bogus.
So does it mean that this...
It was impossible for him to... It was impossible for... Look, saying that he was that 6 trillion naira, that he misappropriated 6 trillion naira and forged the president's signature. It's literally impossible. My father worked at the central bank and retired as a deputy director of my late father, you know. So I know the workings of that organization. I literally grew up going to the CBN every day. I was a former banker. I related with the CBN. I can tell you that accusation is impossible. There's no way that the central bank...
it's impossible to forge.
It's a lie.
Signature.
I make bold to say on public TV, and I want anybody to prove me wrong. It's a lie. They lied against the president of Emefiele because they wanted to nail him. And that's just the bottom line. Let's stop pussyfooting around the issue and stop pretending as if this has ever been anything about corruption.
Okay,
it's not true.
Sorry, I want us to walk around the whole issue of what is going on with the investigation, what is going on in CBN, what is going on in the NNPCL. And I want us to relate it to how the whole issue of corruption is being handled by this administration. I don't know if you recall the last man standing episode by Tony Elumelu. You recall that after the presidential election, and Tony came out to say the last man standing, you know, apparently when the president went to visit him. And like 3 weeks ago, it was Dangote. Now it is Tony Elumelu. These are more like pro-establishment people, you know, people who always, you know, not very political, but somehow you read their sympathy towards the government. And last week, Tony said, the president or the federal government should tell us people who have been stealing Nigeria's oil. It's a very strong...
He pointed to his own organization as holdings.
You're not getting anything, you know. So I think that's a very strong statement. Shogo, do you see this like a crack in the elite consensus? And is there a crack here and there that we don't understand? Can you help us make sense of all these things and how the presidency or the federal government is able to handle all these things in the face of apparent understanding of Nigerians that, look, this particular government is not interested in fighting corruption?
I mean, look, sadly, I don't think much will come out of, you know, that call by our dear senior colleague, Tony Elumelu, because, you know, let's be honest with ourselves. Like you say, there's a consensus. There's an elite consensus. If you like to use a more, that's a very nice balance from you. The street word is cabal.
Okay. But there seems to be a crack.
There is a crack. There's obviously a crack, you know. Look, Dangote, the president of Dangote, Alhaji Aliko Dangote, has been, you know, I was his account officer when I was in the banking industry for a period. You know, I know this gentleman. He's conservative. He's very conservative. He doesn't talk. You know, you have seen him talk in the last 6 months more than we have ever heard him talk in 30 years.
And he says he has a lot more to say.
And he says he has more to say. So there's clearly a crack. You know, the people that have always done AGIP, any government in power, are suddenly finding themselves on the receiving end of something. There's something going on with this particular administration. I suspect, and this is pure conjecture, so please don't quote me, I suspect that perhaps the person at the helm of affairs today is not as giving and as generous, you know, in terms of calling others to the table. If you know, what I mean by the table.
Is it about being generous or about being principles and following the rules of the game?
Oh my goodness, absolutely not. I don't think this has anything to do with principles. I think it has to do with interests. I think it's all about vested interest and selfish interest. And let's not forget, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi, the governor of the CBN at that time, said the problem of this country are interests.
But also during the investigation of Jim Obaze, he was fingered as misappropriating funds, also that letter he sacked. But now bringing it back to what we're talking about as regards the oil sector. Some quotas of the opinion that why Mele Kyari is still in position as the NNPCL director is of the opinion because of the fact that he's helping particular people cover up their own dirty deeds. For example, the Malta blending plants and how that particular country have generated a lot of money. And yet, Nigeria is not really saying anything to that regard. We could also hear of how some foreign entities were pointing at Dangote refineries, saying it's going to distort, in quotes, the world oil movement and environment. So now, do you actually think Nigeria as a country can fight this corruption the way we're seeing it to be as it stands now?
Look, I mean, the points that you raise are very disturbing, because it says that this is much bigger than what we see, and it ties to what Chukwuma was saying about, a crack. There's something going on, and it's far bigger than what we see. Look, people have said, and I think it's become a common parlance, that Nigeria is a crime scene. It's a criminal enterprise run by a few people who are all in collusion. In that group, there is no Christian. So this Christian Youth Forum of Nigeria that is talking, they're just speaking for themselves, because in the group where these things are being done, there's no Christian, there's no Muslim, there's no Igbo, there's no Yoruba or Hausa. They are friends in collusion, seeking their own interests. And it looks as
Back
if...
to that word. I'm holding on to that word.
And it looks as if, in addition to their interests, they apparently, thanks to David Dunde's revelations,
I was coming to that, actually.
So I was coming to that. Yeah, they've been in the realm of
interest.
Yes.
You talked about interest, and I held on to that word. I wrote it down, interest.
Absolutely.
Because I was coming to the David Hundeyi report, interview, and the publication on X that came out over the weekend that talked about being reached, Dialogue F, reaching out to him to write a report that would put the Dangote refinery in bad light, citing the possibility of damage to the climate being done by that refinery. Doesn't that point to the fact that there are other interests outside Nigeria to ensure that refineries don't work, Nigeria continues to import, basically the naira continues to fall, and basically the economy continues to be choked?
Yeah.
How do you speak to this interest from organizations? And he also did say that yes, he also did say that Dialogue F, according to his research, was sponsored by certain organizations in the US. Doesn't that put the US in the middle of all of this?
Maybe, and maybe not. There's something that David also said. He said he wants, he's saying this, part of the reasons he's putting this out there is so that people that jump to say, use the term conspiracy theories, he wants them to stop. Unfortunately, he can't stop it because we don't have the facts. The facts that we do have, according to him, is that he was approached and offered money. That's a fact, if we're to believe him. And that he was offered money to discredit Dangote. We know that. Now, who are those interests? The fact that it's an organization called Dialogue Earth, funded from the US, that operates from outside Nigeria, does not necessarily mean that there are foreign powers or interests behind this. But why can't it be, well-funded, well-oiled, war chest from Nigeria, putting Dialogue Earth up to this so that it can shut Dangote down? What we know for certain is that somebody doesn't want Dangote refinery to work. I think that has become clear.
Refinery to work.
Doesn't want any refinery to work. I think that has become abundantly clear. I don't think this is in the realm of conspiracy theory anymore, because if it were, why is Dangote refinery not getting crude oil from Nigeria? Do you know the benefit, the economic benefit of Dangote operating successfully to Nigeria? It's tremendous. Our exchange rate will crash because we are funding 40% of our imports is refined products, 40%, which means that if we produce all of that in Nigeria, 40% of the pressure on the naira goes away. We will see the naira collapse to below 1,000 naira. How can the government of the day and the country not be eagerly supporting Dangote? Why is Dangote fighting a battle? So I don't know whether it's foreign interest or foreign powers. I don't know, but clearly, somebody does not want Dangote to succeed, and you have to look at the corruption war that we claim we're fighting.
Good. Shegu, it's good that you have still
brought it back
to that issue of corruption. Because
Absolutely.
I'm hugely concerned that a country like Nigeria, you know, where we have oil, gas deposits, I mean, that entity is the cash cow of this country. Yet we remain the poorest of the poor. So I'm trying to relate it to the intentionality. Can you be in specifics? Is it do we see any intentionality on the part of this very government to clear the mess that the oil industry has become over time? Bearing in mind that we have our president as the petroleum minister. Exactly. Are there intentional steps that you can point to that the government is doing to fight corruption and rescue us from this mess?
I mean, look, Chukwuba, I'm sorry, it's not a funny thing, but I can't help but chuckle because the evidence on the table is actually points in the opposite direction. Instead of us looking at intentionality and intentional steps from the presidency to fight corruption in the murkiest industry in Nigeria, I also happen to be opportune to have worked in that sector. So I've worked for an organization that was in the midstream sector. I can tell you, without mincing words, that is the most corrupt. It is the darkest, deepest, murkiest, most opaque sector in the Nigerian economy. The damage that is being done to us as a people in that sector can only be imagined. So if we're to see steps from the president, they will be clear. He will be trying to clear the audience table, to use that expression, starting, for example, by sacking Mele Kyari as soon as he got in as president, the way he immediately sacked Emefiele. You know, when he became president, Emefiele actually was one of the very first appointees of government that went to visit him, you know, not knowing that the boot was waiting for him. The same thing should have happened to Mele. But instead, what we have seen is that indeed the president, by proxy, may very well be benefiting from all of that because we know that his nephew, and again, I am able to say these things boldly on public national TV because they are facts. His nephew, Wale Tinubu, is the owner of one of the biggest oil and gas Oado, you know, in the country.
That just acquired Ajay.
And they have interests. I don't want to go into specific interests, but they have interests. You know, the NNPC is approving. In fact, there was a time that there was a rumor that they were going to sell the NNPC itself to Oando. You know, rumor obviously. And all of that. You know, and all of that. So it's the opposite direction.
Okay.
It looks as if the president is actually benefiting from the mark.
Like there's this song, if I were the president. If you were the president, will you sack Mele Kyari?
No, it would have been the first thing that I would have done. The first thing that you would have done as a president, if you really had problems with the CBN, is to sack the CBN governor, all their directors, get their assistant or, you know, 2 levels below them to take over from them, turn your eyes immediately to the NNPC and sack all of them.
Given the fact they've not generated money to add to the revenue of Nigeria.
I mean, they're even taking from us. Bringing back to the table
of the corruption, we learned, or rather, according to a Guardian report, the Jim Obaze and his team, they were inaugurated on July 28, 2023. Yeah. But part of the report here noted that there was not any certain amount of money that's supposed to be paid to these people. And they were picked from the 6th geopolitical zone in Nigeria. Some people asked for how much they are going to benefit and the tools to do the work, but actually no one said anything about that. And that made some of them to back out, leaving few people to be in that particular team. From the look of things and from how we're having half-baked information as regards fight corruption, we also had that of Zainab launching an app for ministers' appraisal. Absolutely. And up until today, we're yet to get anything. The president told the Qatarian government, if anyone approach you for corruption, come to me directly. And we are yet to see him prosecute even the people that have their names on the radar. We have 159 people that's supposed to be on that probing list, not just Emefiele. Why is it that there's no political will for this present administration to fight the corruption? Or is it that, you know, they are scared that more truth will be made bare?
Fina, I don't like what you're doing to me. You see, because
I just asked a question.
Because I have friends all over the place, and they're going to watch this, and, and they're going to roast me, you know, alive for saying the things that I'm saying. But look, the truth has to be said. I think anybody that expected President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to fight corruption is living in La La Land. You know, let's just be honest with ourselves.
Why do you say so?
You know, because his antecedents. I have always said that the way to predict how a person or anything would go in the future is to look into the past. And you look into the past of this gentleman, this wonderful strategic solution provider to the problems of Nigeria, and you see opacity.
You don't think the president is been shielded?
Opacity.
Don't you think the president is
with everything about him
these things? Because while from what we have read, while the G-Mobaze committee team were investigating the CBN and they're bringing out reports which some have said shouldn't have been brought out the way they were churned out into the media, we understand that Tunde Sabiu, who was a relative to the former president, volunteered, because he was also being investigated, and he volunteered to release about 30 billion naira, dollars, I beg your pardon, $30 billion, and then half of 66 landed properties. You know, he was willing to give that back. And then the chief of staff to the president, Femi Gbajabiamila, was fingered as, you know, going behind the G-Mobaze and his team to negotiate that one from Tunde Sabiu. And that also has been said to be what led to the disbandment of that team. Now, let's relate that to the disbandment of the Ikenga Ugochire Committee on Petroleum Resources and the allegation of bribery that has also come out of that one. And from what we are seeing, one starts to wonder, is the president unaware? Is he being shielded, like some people have said, and being fed some things? Or are these people operating in proxy?
Look, Moses, anybody that knows the person of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, he can never be unaware of anything, nothing. Again, I've worked closely with these people over the years, and I tell you, this man is intelligent. I said it during the elections and all that.
You don't think age is
forget about all of that.
Taking a toll.
It will take a toll. It takes a toll on everybody. It's going to happen to us as well, sitting at this table. But it doesn't make you a dullard. You know, whatever you had, you have. You know, you may not remember some things. You may poop your pants once in a while, you know, and all of that. But your brain still functions. And I tell you that there is nothing that is going on today that the president is not aware of and is not in full active involvement with. And, you know, this idea that, oh, maybe it's just some people, excuse me, sir, he is the Minister of Petroleum. That's an office, you know, and there are reports that come to him as Minister of Petroleum that would not have gotten to him if he wasn't. If he was just president, you know, the minister would have been the one filtering those things to him. He is the minister. So then we can't claim that he doesn't know about these things that are happening.
Or is it that it's happening too long now, Mr. Shegun?
He knows everything, and in fact, I say he's probably directing it.
Mr. Shegun, Obasanjo said something yesterday. He said that, you know, he approached Shell to help, you know, bring back Nigerian refinery, and they declined, saying corruption and mismanagement is top. And then from all indication, we could actually know, we had to take it back to 1975, 76, you know, when all these issues started happening in NNPCL. Obasanjo says 80% of Nigerian oil is being taken away by thieves. Elumelu made mention of 95%. Now, people are beginning to talk. Why will Elumelu be talking about it at this point? Is it because of the windfall that is being pegged on commercial banks? You know, we know his relationship with UBA. And also, some other people are of the opinion that, you know, why are we going to be looking at issues coming from people, calling names or pointing fingers to individuals? Why don't we take it back to the past leaders of Nigeria? Do you really think we would take this issue of probing and checkmating of people back to the past leaders, it will help us have a clear vision of how to fight corruption?
I don't believe that at all. I think the past leaders are gone. I mean, if you want to prosecute them, it's okay. I'll be happy to see some of them go to jail. But the issue is with the current leader. And isn't it funny and instructive, Fina, that Ugochinyere and his committee went around asking questions. They went to Dangote Refinery and all of that. The day they went to Obasanjo, and Obasanjo, as usual, you know, the man is growing old. He doesn't send anybody. He's going to die soon. And the closer a person gets to the grave, with all due respect to him, he's closer to his grave than he is to his birthday. You know,
The more truthful they can be.
Yes, the more truthful they get, because they suddenly realize, hey, I'm going to meet my maker very soon. And in any case, he knows that he has nothing to fear from anybody. Is it death you want to threaten him with? You say, I'm going to die soon. You can't kill me. You know, so how come as soon as Obasanjo just spilled the beans, as he likes to do anyway, you know, Ugochiere's committee was disbanded. You know, Obasanjo said too much as a result of Ugochiere going to instigate him. So there's a lot going on, and one would actually be, I'm so surprised that with all of these terrible accusations flying around, that the president hasn't stood up to say, hey, what's going on here? And call for an immediate, appoint somebody else, appoint another special investigator for the oil and gas industry. How come he hasn't said anything?
Shegu, on 29th May 2023, President Bola Tinubu said, subsidy is gone. But before he said that, he also said that subsidy had benefited a very small group of people unduly. It was no longer serving the interest of Nigerian masses who were meant to benefit from it. And Shegu, I know that of a population of 220 million that we have, there are not up to 50 people that are involved in this oil cartel, in this oil business. Yet, for the past 20, 24, 25 years, nobody has been brought to book. What does it tell you about the will to fight corruption? I still run around that issue of fighting corruption, because I know that the moment we tie it up, 60% of our problems from every other sector is solved.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when the president says subsidy is gone, you know, of course, I'm very well documented to be very, very pro-subsidy in my stance. My economic ideology is one of social capitalism. You cannot be a capitalist without taking care of your people. So when he said subsidy was gone, and using those excuses you give, I never supported it, because it makes no sense to me. You can't tell me that 50 people are benefiting from a scam, and the obvious solution shouldn't be to stop
go
that
after
scam,
those
to
people.
go after just 50 people. Instead of going after just 50 people, let's be charitable and increase the number to 1,000.
1,000.
You know, you don't go after the 1,000 people. You take away the thing that they are benefiting from corruptly, which is benefiting 200 million people. You now remove that thing. So you are punishing 200 million people for the corruption of a few people as a result of your inability or unwillingness or both to prosecute the few people. It makes no sense.
So are we now going
It makes no sense.
Are we going with the words of Falana, the son, who says that Nigerian vampire elites, the ruling class, in catalog of looting and subjecting Nigerians to excruciating poverty?
That's absolutely what is going on today. We're suffering. I mean, look, the truth is that Nigerians are suffering as a result of the inability and unwillingness of the few people that have been entrusted by God. Whatever your opinion as to how they emerged, the elections were rigged or was not rigged. At least as a Christian, I know that there is no authority that emerges without God allowing it. That's just the way it is. Okay. So they are there, you know, by God. How come they are not taking care of the interests of the people and instead are punishing the people the more?
All right, there's a school of thought.
Terrible.
There's a school of thought that will tell you that subsidy never existed in the first place. And the announcement that subsidy is gone is just a ploy to increase the pump price of fuel for the Nigerian. Now, this school of thought will tell you that certain individuals, maybe in the 70s, way back then, decided as a way of taking money from the coffers of government, decided to push the narrative of subsidy being paid on petroleum products. You know, that's what the school of thought is saying. And that is how they have siphoned money from the coffers of government for so long. Because we see that in the past years, NNPC hasn't declared monies that, they haven't declared anything, but then subsidies are supposedly being paid. And, how do you react to that subsidy never existed, but certain individuals, the cabal, in quote now, used that as a way of collecting money. And now it was time to increase the pump price.
Well, I mean, look.
And then the president made the declaration.
I can't go with that school of thought because facts are facts, data is data, and I'm a data person. I would like to believe that it didn't exist, and for a time, I probably followed that school of thought. But then, look, if you go to just Google the word petrol Platts price, international petrol Platts price today, you find that over the last, it's always, in fact, the point was $1.32, $1.32, the price of petroleum products from any refinery anywhere in the world, because it's a commodity. Earlier this year, it fell to about 90 cents. If you convert 90 cents at exchange rate at that time, it came to about 1,200, 1,300 naira. And yet we're paying 600 naira at the pump. There is a subsidy. Whichever way you look at it, there is a subsidy. There has always been a subsidy. Whether that subsidy was from the cost that we're applying on crude oil being refined, or from the price that we're paying for landing refined products, there was a subsidy that has always been. And subsidy was removed. Not all of it, clearly, as you can now see, but subsidy was removed. The question about the corruption around it was also true. You know, I was in that industry. I know that people cook up documents. That one is standard practice in that industry. You know, you cook up documents, you create shipments that don't exist, cargo that don't exist, ships that are, you know, round trip, all sorts of things were happening with documentation in active connivance with government officials and regulators. You know, so the scam was there and subsidy was there. Did it need to be removed? Maybe. I don't know. I don't agree it should have been, but there are people that they will swear on their lives.
You think if subsidy was there, it should have remained?
Absolutely.
So Nigerians can buy fuel, remain in the capacity that it was.
We have no reason not to subsidize petrol, Moses. We have no reason.
But
look, the revenue.
Why should we subsidize petrol when we should have refineries here?
Even if we have refineries, and I think that's another thing that we must clear. If all the refineries work today, Port Harcourt, Kaduna, Warri, and all of that, add Dangote on top, petrol price, because of the international price of crude, petrol price will never be lower than 1,000 and above.
No, but we have our own crude.
Unless we now subsidize the refineries by supplying them crude at a discount to the international price of crude. It is still a subsidy because Nigeria will be losing revenues as a result of that, providing crude at a lower cost. And you would then argue, why not? If we're mining this thing from beneath the ground at the extremely low production cost. Do you know the production cost per barrel of crude is ridiculously small? It's something about $4 or something like that. So why can't we provide that crude at lower than international prices so that Nigerians can buy petrol at a lower cost, especially given a poverty prevalence? And the poverty is as a result of governance failures. Anyway, so I don't have a problem with subsidies.
Wouldn't that be distorting the rules of OPEC?
No, well,
as regards the amount a crude oil should be sold in the amount.
No, they can't control. They can control how much you sell, control in quotes, and it's not really control. You sign up to it willingly. So they can control how much you sell internationally. They can't control what you do with your local consumption. We have a law, PIA, that provides for domestic consumption allocation. I mean, come on. So OPEC has no say in all of this. So for me, I'm just saying, if we deal with look, you've quoted Tony Elumelu, we've quoted Dangote, we've quoted Obasanjo, people that say they swear by their graves that we're losing about 80% of our crude production. If we fix that problem, excuse me, why should subsidy be a problem? Do you know the kind of subsidy that citizens of Bahrain, UAE are enjoying? They don't pay for anything. The government pays for everything. So you can argue, well, they have large oil deposits and their population is small, and we'll agree. But that small little bit petrol price, given our poverty prevalence, that we can't enjoy that. Look, any economic theorist that is telling you all this fiscal is balderdash, that a fiscal balance as a result of a budget deficit, we're borrowing money. We're lying to ourselves. We should instead turn as economic analysts. And I'm speaking to all of them, all my senior colleagues, all the Bismarck Rewanis and all of these guys of this world. Dr. Doyin Salami is my lecturer. Let us tell ourselves the truth. So we shouldn't be I'm sorry, Chukuma, we shouldn't be saying that subsidy is a bad thing, it's distorting, Nigeria would have gone bankrupt. No, it is not subsidy that's making Nigeria bankrupt. It is the stealing. And we need to tell ourselves that truth. How can it is somebody's claims, somebody that should know, The president, former president of the country, says 80% of our crude is being stolen. There is not 400,000 barrels per day, and then we are saying subsidy is the problem. What's wrong with us as a people? Let's be honest with ourselves and call the problem what it is and hold our leaders accountable.
How possible is it that Nigeria and the oil and gas sector, and how sophisticated it is with the meters and everything, from drilling point to the point of exploitation, can lose 80% without the big weight in the country?
Look, Tony Elumelu said that oil industry, and don't forget, he owns Transcorp Energy. So he kind of they know what they're saying, right? He says that it's not Coca-Cola business. This is not a bottle of Coke that you can enter a supermarket.
Well, let's be careful with
I'm sorry. Free advert. I'm so sorry. Related. Please charge my account.
It's very
Apologies. It's not a bottle of fizzy drink, soft drink that you can just put in your pocket and walk out of the supermarket. For you to steal crude oil, you need ships. How is it possible?
And we've had ships. We've had ships.
Are you kidding me?
For 13 years.
It's impossible. So there's nothing called, look, this oil theft thing, I think we need to change that name. I think the media needs to begin to shine the light, and there's nothing called oil theft. What
would you call it?
We have to come up with a name. But you can't call it oil theft when it is being done with the active knowledge and collusion and connivance of everybody that should know. The president, the military hierarchy, the Navy, the NNPC, the police, the DSS. There's none of these people that can tell you that they don't know what is going on, that they don't know who the people are. It's impossible, because we're talking of ships. I mean, ship. There is no ship. You can't have a ship and not know the owner of the ship now. So this idea that they caught one bunkering ship and then they set it on fire. Why are you setting it on fire? Who is the owner?
That's a question.
Who is the owner?
Asking.
So Shegu, you support the president to return subsidy?
Absolutely.
Do you think subsidy was even gone at all?
No, it was removed. A portion of it was removed because, the price that we're paying 184 naira to the at a pump per liter at a pump price, as at a time when the international price is about 1,002. So the subsidy we're paying was humongous.
When we're paying subsidy in Nigeria, Mr. Shegun, Nigeria spends 3.2 trillion naira, and the price of petroleum, the price of the pump price was just 250, 300. Yeah. And they say subsidy is gone. And Nigeria, according to what Wala Edun said we'll be paying 5.4 trillion naira in 2024 alone.
Yes.
And yet, the pump price stood at 900, 800 naira. Are we really saying that subsidy was actually gone?
Subsidy never went completely. We were
partial subsidy.
Yes. So what happened was the subsidy was partially removed. Because if they had removed subsidy entirely at that time, we would have moved from 180 to 1,000 easily. So they couldn't have done that.
All right then. All right, then, this would be a good place to drop anchor on this conversation as we go into another conversation. I know there's so much more to talk about because you're shaking your head out. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, what can we do? We can only talk, and for me, I think my closing thoughts on this topic is that Nigerians, especially my colleagues, because we're enabling this thing. Every time we say, oh, Nigeria will go bankrupt if we don't remove subsidy, we're enabling corruption, we're enabling theft, we're enabling the pauperization of the Nigerian population, and we have to stop it. The media people, business analysts on TV, business anchors on TV and radio stations need to stop saying this, with all due respect, nonsense, that subsidy is a problem. It's absolute rubbish. So please, I would like us to, let's face the issues and call a spade what it is. What we need is to fight corruption and the revenue leakages. I put out a tweet yesterday and I said, how can you even call it a leakage when the majority of the revenue is actually what is missing? It's a leakage when some little bit is going out. It trickles. But it's the majority that is lost. And we say subsidy is the problem. Are we joking?
Okay, thank you, Shegun. Up next, stop exploiting Nnamdi Kanu'S detention for personal gains. Ipob warns Igbo politicians. We'll go on a short break, and when we come back, we'll delve straight into that matter. Please stay with us.